Trade for peace again. Reducing the trade cost for sustainable development. Fair trade and sustainable development goals. Fair trade and climate crisis. WTO trade and gender. Sustainable trade for sustainable food systems. Food security is very important. Let's talk about trade costs for sustainable development. Reducing the trade costs for inclusive sustainable growth. Food is wasted. It never reaches the market. We are producing food for the entire world, but it is not getting where it should be. This is what aim for trade should be about. It should reach. We have enough food for need, not for greed. Time is money. Never seen more appropriate. If it is taking 40, 50, 60 or more days to export, to produce, then you are not doing most of the trading system. High trade costs disconnect the international flow of goods and services. Debate, does trade helps or harm the poor? That's what it is. Trade helps or harm the poor? Question. How do we reduce the cost? On trading developing countries, we have to develop a path for them to connect their poor countries to global markets. Developing countries share world trade growth since 2000 and has reduced the trade cost where they are resulted in for weak infrastructure inefficiencies. It can increase income and boost jobs. As a result, lower trade costs produce inclusive economic growth. Sustainable development goals gives opportunity for ending poverty, protecting our environment, and realizing sustainable development for all, inclusive. Reducing trade costs support sustainable development goals. So, developing world and developed world alignment, trading systems, sustainable development, ending poverty, protecting our environment, and how trade costs support sustainable development. 8 areas where fair trade really makes a difference. No poverty, zero hunger, gender equality, no poverty, zero hunger, gender equality, decent work and economic growth, job, decent growth and economic growth, responsible consumption and production, responsible consumption and production, climate action, peace, justice and strong institutions, peace, justice and strong institutions, partnership for the goals, peace, justice and strong institutions, partnership for the goal. Fair Trade Foundation is a charitable organization working on above areas. 8 areas where fair trade really makes a difference. No poverty. The best way to eliminate poverty is to pay decent income to farmers for their crops and pay a fair wage. Fair trade, unique minimum prices access as a safety when the prices crash. 8 areas where fair trade really makes a difference. No poverty. The best ways to eliminate poverty is to pay decent income to the farmers for their crops and pay a fair wage. Fair trade, unique minimum price access to as a safety net when prices crash. Zero hunger, small scale farmers help the world, but only if they get a decent income, they can invest in farms and futures. Zero hunger. Small scale farms needs support. They need to feed the world, but only if they get a decent income. Otherwise, how they will survive? Gender equality. A fair trade standard prohibits discrimination. Our gender equality, very important. Leadership at schools, sharing, funding, empower women to become entrepreneurs and managers. Now, peace, justice and strong institutions. We are the only global standard which is now 50% owned and run by farmers and workers who decide for themselves how to invest that extra money they get from fair trade sales. Partnership for the goals. Fair trade brings together farmers and workers, consumers, the trade unions, business, government campaigners to deliver real impact and sustainable values for economic growth. Just like Sustainable Development Goals, fair trade aim to leave no one behind. Climate crisis again remains fair for people and planet. Fair trade means fair people and planet. It helps the farmers to deal with huge challenges from climate already causing them. Challenges like less fertile land, failing harvest, and more extreme weather. That's not in our hand. Famine or drought or flood. It means our eco-friendly fair trade standards and means export advices on sustainable farming techniques from our fair trade producer network to offer support all around the world. Fair trade cares about climate crisis, as climate crisis is not fair. Carbon emissions per person in the UK are 28 times more than this in Sierra Leone, but they are getting it hardest. Unless we take urgent climate action, this will get worsened for various communities in future. Upon 50% of the land used for coffee could be unusable by 2050. Plant diseases are becoming more common. Cocoa trees will be harder to grow in West Africa. Wine production could reduce by 40 to 50% in South Africa and Chile. In recent WTO emphasis on gender issues, raise awareness, WTO emphasizing through the following: raise awareness on the link between trade and gender, facilitating member actions on trade and gender, creating a new data on the impact of trade and women, provide training on these issues, government officials and to women entrepreneurs. WTO developing a training module, trade and gender, and plan to create a women entrepreneurs programs. WTO members are using the trade policy reviews to highlight their policy development that contribute to gender equality. Partnering with the World Bank to generate new data and promote better understanding on the link between trade and gender. WTO is all about taking down barriers to trade and barriers to opportunity. Many barriers will still stand in the way of women participation in the global economy. We need to do more. Sustainable trade for sustainable food systems. Food should be produced where it can be done more efficiently. First, intensive export zones are highly damaging to the environment. Because of this, countries tend to specialize in exporting specific products, but this comes with many hidden costs. Second, not everyone benefit equally from exports. Countries focusing on high value industries get industries, skills and infrastructure. Large scale chemical intensive monocultures and factory farm drive biodiversity loss and degradation and greenhouse gas emissions. When it comes to both countries specializing in cash crops get more low wages, unpredictable prices, and even end up having to import the food they used to produce. Now, food systems is very important. So trade itself is not the problem, but when it puts to the above everything else, we compromise in society long-term interest and undermine our chance of achieving sustainable development goals. Policies to help export industries to keep growing, but they also accelerate environmental damage, undercut local farmers and deprive government of much needed revenues. Big export countries, industries have major power to influence the policies. This leads to fast-track trade agreements, special tax deals and preference across land and resources for a privileged few. By countries specializing in cash crops get a few wages, unpredictable prices, and even end up. So most important, we can use trade to hold multinational to hold highest standards no matter where they operate. We need to move beyond tired economic theories. Trade which puts value over volume. Trade which puts people above interest of export industries. We need sustainable trade for food systems. So those are the points which we have to necessarily recognize. These are important predicaments. We have to understand these dynamics and make sure we drive it with the difference in total terms. And fair trade, free trade, sustainable development goals are all interconnected in real order.